Filez-moi tout votre fric.
Hein? Quoi? T'es qui, toi?
On s'en fout, contentez-vous de me filer tout ce que vous avez, sinon...
Sinon quoi?
Ah, t'as un gun?
Ah, j'ai un gun aussi, espèce de...
Oh, mec!
Alors, première question, qui la pose? Oui. Lady first, I like that.
Yes, ma'am. Mademoiselle.
Bon, je comprends l'anglais, mais je vais pas oser la question en anglais.
Pas de problème, dites-moi.
Je m'excuse d'avance pour lui. En fait, j'en ai deux. La première, c'est est-ce que finalement c'est un rêve de gamin d'avoir ce super pouvoir-là? Et la deuxième, c'est quelles sont vos influences? Parce que j'ai l'impression qu'elles sont assez mélangées dans vos choix de films. Voilà.
Right.
Donc,
Alors, there are two questions for you. Well, first of all, is it really like almost a kid's dream of yours to have that kind of superpower? Let's tell the truth, Josh.
Oui.
Elaborate.
Yeah, I think for me and probably anybody else, when we drift off into our daydreams when we're kids, we imagine that we're moving things with our minds. And I realized kind of early on that if I actually had telekinetic powers, at a certain point, things wouldn't turn out very good. They wouldn't go to a very good place, because it all starts out with like, oh, I'm going to move that, and I'm going to kind of mess with that person, and then very soon I'd start hurting people. Because I think I definitely, as a child, related more to Andrew Detmer, our protagonist, because I had a lot of, I was bullied a lot as a kid, so there's a wish fulfillment on a level of just pure fun, and then wish fulfillment on a level of revenge. And just, I always felt like telekinesis is a gateway power, because if it is like a muscle, and if it's something that you could develop over time, where it's like going to the gym, you know, lifting 10-pound barbells, and then I can go 20, and then I can go 30. If I could lift up a pencil, and then I can lift up a car, somewhere between the weight of a car and a pencil is my own body weight, and if I could lift my body, that means I can fly. So it's kind of two powers in one.
Well, now the second part of the question was, well, the lady seems to think that in the film, there's so many mixed influences. Could you tell us about the different kind of influences you had in your life and on this film in particular?
I read, I watched lots of movies when I was a kid, lots of superhero movies. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, so a lot of the movies that I watched were big kind of blockbuster action movies, so those are pure wish fulfillment films. Like, I'm the guy who can jump away from exploding vehicles, and I can fly, and I can do all of these things. I think The Matrix was kind of the ultimate version of that, where you take the everyman and he suddenly can unlock all of these powers to do whatever he wants. And I always wanted to see that in the context of real life. There was a short story that I read by H.P. Lovecraft. I'm a really big H.P. Lovecraft fan. And a lot of the stories that he wrote were journal-based kind of stories, where it was just somebody, June 1st, I woke up and this kind of odd thing happened, and then toward the middle of the story, you see these characters kind of deteriorating and being affected by some odd thing. So there's this story called A Color Out of Space, about this family, and it's all written from their perspective. And they find this strange substance outside near their farm, I think. And they don't know where it came from or what it is, but it begins to drive the family insane very slowly. And it's very, very, very creepy, and you kind of don't understand what's going on. On the kind of pure science fiction level, it's never explained, but what you see is a family unraveling. And I always wanted to see a movie that could be portrayed as a kind of a raw documentary, just raw footage of a kid filming his life and being affected by some kind of a supernatural force, but not making it about the origin of the supernatural part, but to just make it about how it affects the kid's life and people around him, his internal conflicts.
Thank you. Question?
And Akira, because I know everybody.
Actually, I was about to ask you about Akira, if you did not mention it. The manga, yeah.
Akira is one of my favorite movies, and what I really love about Akira specifically and how it relates to Chronicle is how the idea of a protagonist is portrayed, where you start with a character who is bullied and we feel bad for, and toward the end of the film, he ultimately becomes the threat or kind of the antagonist of the story. But we still have sympathy for him, and we feel bad, and we're rooting for him, even though he's causing destruction and hurting people. So.
All right. So Andrew is your Tetsuo in a way.
Tetsuo!
Hein? Autre question, n'oubliez pas de mettre le micro car nous sommes enregistrés. Voilà.
Just to follow up on her question, because you didn't say among your movies, you have the point of view of the camera all the time, and they are obviously, you think about Blair Witch or the Spanish movie Rec and Rec 2 or Cloverfield. I mean, which one, did you...
I'd say Rec is probably the one that is most influential in terms of the production of this movie, because it's one of the only found footage movies where you can justify a semi-professional camera style, because the camera operator is a professional news camera guy. So there's a shakiness and a craziness to the camera work when it's appropriate, but for the most part, it doesn't begin with this kind of nauseous, queasy, claustrophobic, where the hell are we? Person doesn't know how to use their camera kind of feeling. I wanted to make a movie that where the main character who's filming everything is a guy who can hold a camera steady, and in real life we all have a friend who can hold a camera steady. So as his telekinesis evolves and he begins operating his camera telekinetically, it was sort of the missing link cinematically to how you can shoot a movie like this and kind of elevate the aesthetic in a way. A big part of the script was sort of every 10 pages, visually, the movie refreshes itself. In the beginning of the movie, we have a combination of a kid holding his camera, walking around. It's his first time using a camera. He's kind of a natural with it, so he has an eye for framing his world, and it's not too shaky or uncomfortable to watch. And then sometimes his camera is on his tripod, so there's a balance to that. We have our experience in the hole, black, cut to, suddenly there's a new camera. We don't know how much time has passed, but we know that he's gotten better with the camera, and it's a cleaner, newer, HD 1080p kind of look. So we're constantly moving forward. We're not stuck in this kind of inside somebody's horrible camera for 90 minutes.
Question. Oui, micro.
Or just another one. I mean, the end of the movie implies that this guy is going to look for answers. Does it mean that you wrote a trilogy, another movie? I mean, do you have more stories to come?
Yeah, there are definitely some ideas floating around between Max and I about where this could go and a bigger story, but it was really important to be able to make a single film that stands on its own, that doesn't have to answer those supernatural questions, but instead answer the emotional aspect of the film, which is really what, you know, the core of the movie. You know, I always think about like Star Wars as a movie. It's the first one, New Hope, is it's part of a trilogy, but the Star Wars ends. A New Hope ends with the Death Star is destroyed, and everybody's yay happy, and everybody gets their medals. So here, this is the resolution to Matt, who we open up as this kind of pseudo-intellectual, slightly pretentious kid who just wants to prove to everybody how smart he is by quoting philosophy arbitrarily when nobody asks him to open his mouth. And as he starts to go through this experience, there's a level of cynicism that starts to go away from these three kids because they're experiencing the ultimate wish fulfillment, which, you know, if you're a highly cynical guy and then one day you saw God or Jesus or whoever, you would stop being so cynical. So it's sort of what happens to him. And in the final scene, it's kind of like the ultimate act of living your philosophy, because he's saying that Andrew is the camera and he's leaving him to, you know, forever in Tibet, which is where he always wanted to go. So he's saying farewell to Andrew and leaving him in peace. So he doesn't have to say, by the way, this is I'm doing something very philosophical, Andrew, and I hope you appreciate how smart I am. He's just doing it, and he's matured. So.
Question. Well, I have a question for you. I mean,
Sure.
One of the taglines is, you know, of the movie is, "What are you capable of?" Well, I was wondering, what did you prove yourself you were capable of when you challenged such an incredible movie? I mean, that's a big challenge for you. So what did you find out you were capable of that you didn't think you could?
Well, not feigning in production was a big one.
That's a big one.
I have faint spells, so I was I stayed on my toes. I guess finishing a movie is what I'm capable of.
I mean, are there really moments where you were like freaking out because it's your first time movie and that's a major scope movie?
I was never freaked out at all, because I kind of felt like this movie was my ultimate challenge in life, to tackle something that is at its on the very surface is kind of a sacrilegious thing to do as a hardcore cinephile, I guess, to do a very commercial film in the found footage aesthetic, because it is something that you know, real kind of movie people don't take seriously. So I wanted to prove to myself more than anything that I could make a movie like this or realize a film like this that sort of elevates it cinematically and has a lot of thought process and logic behind it. And I saw the movie in my head enough to know that it could be real and that it could work. The challenge was just to convince 5,000 people around me every single day for about a year straight that it could work like this. So it was just about being very, 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 very persuasive, as if my life depended on it. So there's a lot of anxiety behind that, but it's good anxiety. It's a creative anxiety.
Question? Oui? Ah bah, le micro, attendez de voir le micro, s'il vous plaît. It's not such a long way.
Bonjour.
Hi. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. What is the story of the movie? I mean, the background. How it's possible to do a movie for you were a young filmmaker and making through Fox?
It all started with I just had this idea. Like I said before, it was a combination of a lot of ideas and images and things that I wanted to see in a movie. So I've always wanted to make this movie, and it was in, I think, late 2009. I was in between freelance editing gigs. I've been working kind of professionally as an editor since I was 14, and there's not a lot of money in that, so I was really broke, and I was crashing on my mom's couch, and I was in that mode of like, I want to fly out of here right now. I was just staring at the clouds, and I kind of got lost in that daydream mode, and it was like a real epiphany. It hit me, and I saw the whole story. I was like, that's it. This is it. I saw The Color Out of Space, and I was thinking about Carrie, and I was thinking about Akira, and I was like, all of these movies that have come out in the last 10 years, Cloverfield and Blair Witch Project and Rec, and have prepared mainstream audiences to accept a movie told from this perspective. So I started just writing furiously for days and days and days, and just coming up with these different scenarios. And I ended up running into an old acquaintance of mine from when I was a teenager, Max Landis, who was living in Miami for a little while and going to college, and he was writing a lot of these really cool, crazy, genre-blending screenplays, and I read a couple of them, and they were just, he wrote such great dialogue, and his influences are very, very comic book based, Stephen King based, and sort of this like magical realism, and he's really just a mature a voice for a young writer, and I knew that if I was going to partner up with somebody, that it should be from a younger voice rather than partnering up with an older writer trying to make a statement on younger people. I wanted it to be more kind of pure. I didn't want there to be any irony behind it. So I ran into Max, and I just started telling him about what I was working on, and he instantly, jumped on it and wanted to write it. And that was really exciting for me because we shared the same passions. And he wrote a draft in about 2 weeks, and it was just really, really, really great script. Much more hard R than the movie ultimately we made. But we did a little bit of work on it. We had our own separate reps at the time. They got together and encouraged me to write a director's manifesto, like this director's statement, where in about 3 to 4 pages I detailed how the movie would be shot, how I saw the movie, production notes, just a very clearly communicated vision on page, and essentially attaching it to the script with FYI. You can only buy this script if you let me direct it. So we put the script out to all the studios and all the producers in town through the normal channels, through our reps, and a lot of people responded to it pretty quickly. Fox in particular was pretty aggressive about it. They called us in the day after the script was sent out, and we really, really, really vibed with the executives over at Fox and our producers, Adam Schroeder and John Davis, and everybody was very excited about it, and seemed like a great fit to make this movie at the same place that brought us Star Wars and Alien and all these movies that are my favorite movies ever. So, it was a very natural collaborative process that the studio embraced, and kind of every step of the way, we just all kind of felt like we were onto something new and unique. The studio was very excited about it. We spent about 6 months doing some pretty heavy script development work, and lots of, I storyboarded with a group of guys that I work with in Culver City, pretty much every scene in the movie, with different scene variations and different ways that we can do it. We did animated previses for multiple scenes, including the big third act climactic battle that you saw. The flying stuff we did previs on. Eventually, the Fox CEO, Tom Rothman, asked me to shoot a test scene because he was very impressed and happy with all the early materials I was showing him. And but he just wanted to know what the hell the movie was going to look like. So we cast this thing in about 3 days. We shot it in 1 day. It was like $40,000 kind of a thing. And we shot a version of the diner scene that you saw in the movie with these 3 actors. And kind of combined a couple of different visual effects scenes that were in different parts of the movie. And, we showed it to Tom, and he was really excited about it, and he said, "When can you start?" And I gave him a pretty pragmatic answer. I was like, "Well," and this was like in February. I said, maybe mid-April seems like a good day. And he goes, "When a studio head asks you when you can start, you say tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay, all right, tomorrow, I'm there." And then literally it was like a week later, we went to South Africa, which is where we shot the movie. Oddly enough, the whole movie was shot in South Africa for Seattle. And that became kind of a new challenge in and of itself. Our wonderful production designer, Stephen Altman, who a son of Robert Altman. He did Gosford Park and The Player, and he this really great show on Showtime in the States. I don't know if it airs here, called Shameless, with William H. Macy. And what I really liked about Shameless is just how grimy and real and intimate the look of the show is. It looks like you've just stepped into somebody's dirty apartment. And so he brought this sense of authenticity and just griminess and mundane, everyday Americana to our production in South Africa. So it was, that's ...
Question. Well, you were earlier talking about the casting, and in fact, I would like to talk a bit about the actors, because I understand there was a very long casting process, and then you would do a lot of rehearsal, and you wouldn't tell each actor necessarily what you would say to other actors. Could you tell us about you worked with those kids that are, by the way, extraordinary?
Oh, well, they're unbelievable, those guys. They're great. And by the way, they were always on to me when I was, cut and then run over and whisper into somebody's ear. They're like, "What is he saying to?" So
why would you do that?
Yeah, but they're great. They're so amazing. We set out wanting to find actors that had a look like they were familiar, like they could be somebody that you might have seen before, but relatable and realistic and not movie star-ish, but the kind of kids who you can see breaking out and becoming stars in their own right. We met Dane Dehaan, who played Andrew Detmer, pretty early on. We had a general meeting with him, Adam Schroeder, my producer, and I, and he just really impressed us. We saw this season 2 of In Treatment on HBO, and he has this really amazing arc in it, and he just has this depth to him immediately when you see him. His eyes and his face just tell a story. So, which is very helpful in a movie where you rarely see the main character, because most often he's off screen. So in the times when you actually do see Andrew, we want to know a lot about him, and his face does tell that story. So he was great. We were very lucky to get him. He was very excited about it. And then we spent the next month and a half and probably auditioned about 1,000 actors, and ended up in a final mix and match auditioning process that involved about 15 other guys for Matt and Steve. And we mixed and matched and did different combinations of the actors to see how they play off of Dane and to see how they play off of each other. And when we got Michael B. Jordan and Alex Russell and Dane together in the same room, the energy between them, the connection was instant, and these 3 guys had never met each other before. So there was just something so natural about their rapport, and it's something that I think when we see those 3 guys together, we think of being together with our own friends, and there's just something kind of like contagious and about those scenes when they're having fun together, because it's like we're along with them. So there's a natural friendship that plays on screen really well.
Question. Well, do you feel that in a way your film is a new aesthetics, really? I mean, we are, thanks to YouTube, cameras on our phones, iPhones, etc., we are constantly self-chronicling our lives. I mean, do you feel that your film, in a way, is a new aesthetics brought to Hollywood, where really this trend had never been captured before on camera?
You know, I grew up around a lot of documentary filmmaking, and so to me, it isn't really a new thing. I think in a broader sense, it's an aesthetic that's being accepted by the mainstream. So we live in a real kind of like reality television saturated culture, and so we're so used to seeing people filming themselves and talking about themselves, and it's a real kind of like we've transformed into a real kind of like me, self-photographed, self-filmed world. And I think in particular, and it's not a bad thing, because you know, it's every generation has their own experience, which is, you know, I don't think it's to really be critiqued or commented on, but to just be observed. So you know, in this movie, I feel like, since this is the most self-photographed generation, that it just had to play as kind of like a natural thing. So because kids are so familiar with cameras and these recording devices, that it could be justified without question from the time the movie starts until it ends. If this were 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, it would be a little bit more odd to suggest that a kid is walking around his high school with this big camera, filming things. It's just a little more odd, but you know, we have cameras that are the size of this pen, and people just go like this all the time.
True.
And then my mic went out. Hello. So yeah, yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I think it's an emerging aesthetic that hasn't quite been, I guess, nobody's written a book about it yet.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Well, here we go. Then I continue our conversation, right? Well, I have visuals.
By the way,
film.
I'll answer anything, and I take criticism really well. So if you didn't like the movie, feel free to tell me. No
All right,
argument.
there's a question here. Haha, let's now that you said that, let's see what we're gonna hear.
It's just a small question.
Sure.
You shot the movie in South Africa, and why did you choose Seattle as the city for the movie? Because of the Space Needle? Because of the weather?
The Space Needle actually had a great deal to do with it. The original script was set in Portland, and when we brought it to the studio, I mean, I've been to Portland before. It's a beautiful city. It's interesting. It's fascinating. I think the Pacific Northwest is just really fascinating part of America, because it's kind of like the last frontier that was explored, and it's still sort of, you know, has this kind of like odd, ethereal sort of vibe to it. So I've always been attracted to stories that take place there, and Max as well. So we wanted it to be somewhere around there, and we brought it to the studio, and we were going through script development, and we were thinking about the battle in the end. It was actually an idea from Steve Asbell, our executive, who brought up the Space Needle, and then we just like all kind of jumped out of our chairs like, yeah, yes, the Space Needle, because you know, there have been plenty of movies set in Seattle, but there really hasn't been a movie that uses the Space Needle as a part of a big action set piece. So it was an opportunity to do something a little unique with an iconic building that we all kind of know and recognize.
Or
the what?
Fantastic Four, you know.
Who?
Or
There's been some leaks in the press, I think.
Century Fox has
There's
a lot of different license.
You know, it's weird. I woke up and just saw all that stuff just like everybody else did, and you know, it's there at Fox, and so I'm sure somebody came to that conclusion and just decided that's what's going to happen. But I mean, I really have no idea right now. I'm working on a lot of just original ideas and different things that I want to do. So yeah, I mean, I really don't know. But I do love comic book movies and superhero movies. So
Well, you said earlier that you
And-
wanted the film. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry.
That you wanted the film to be really grounded in reality. So you really didn't do too much of CGI. But that visuals that are absolutely stunning. I'm talking about when they are flying in the clouds, the football game, and obviously the last chapter of the film. I mean, how did you do this technically? I found that the clouds flying absolutely amazing, and the last thing, the blowing up of everything, is quite something.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we it was a lot of work. The mantra kind of going forward early in prep was that the visual effects in the movie had to look as real as anything in the first scene in the movie, which is just the kid turning on his camera. So we couldn't be too fancy about the way the magic and the telekinesis played on screen. We didn't want it to look too cool or stylistic. We wanted to keep everything pretty grounded and within kind of, looked like there's gravity and weight to it, and it was really kind of like in the small details. And part of that in production was to keep everything as practical and on camera as possible. So for every scene that had a visual effect in it, we sort of sketched out different scenarios where this is the digital version of it, and then this is the practical version. The practical version being the preferred version of how we would do it, and then shoot the digital backup version in case it looked like Peter Pan high school production. So.
That's what you did with the car in the parking lot, right?
Yeah, and that was there was a lot of rotoscoping in this movie. In particular, the parking lot scene when Steve moves the car across the parking lot with his mind. There were about probably 40 giant, muscular big guys with ropes, and the car was on skates, and they pulled the car completely across the parking lot and then with real finesse and performance settled the car perfectly into another spot. And I think we did about like 9 or 10 takes of that. So
Cruel director.
Yeah, a lot of people were very mad at me that day, but they really liked the shot at the end of the day. So people seem to get over that stuff when the shots really turns out really cool. We worked very closely with a core group of visual effects supervisors. I really mean geniuses. This one fellow, Simon Hansen, who's local in South Africa. He was a former colleague of the District 9 writer-director Neil Blomkamp. And Simon he's a wonderful, creative guy who just comes up with these ways that you can shoot things and do things. He's really like a mad genius, and he invented these circular rigs that we used for all the flying sequences. And the idea was for our cinematographer Matt Jensen to create these dynamic lighting setups where there was constantly moving light sources that would switch from hard light to diffused light to simulate what it would look like if you were passing through clouds. Because if you pass through a cloud, it's diffused, and then you come out of the cloud, and the light is a bit harder. So the real key to making this work in harmony on a film set, because oftentimes you have the visual effects departments and the special effects departments and the cinematography and camera departments, they don't really talk to each other very often. So I really encouraged everybody to blend their ideas together so that we would just kind of, make sure that everybody was on the same page and that it was all going to kind of work, and that once we got to the digital stage, because we shot that on a green screen, that we would be basing all of the digital clouds and all the lights on all of the practical lights that were used on set. So if the light becomes diffused on the performers, that means that they're passing through a cloud. So the actors and their interaction with the lighting and the movement we use that as our guide in the digital stage, as opposed to using digital to, inform us as to where to move our actors on the screen. We worked, and it was a coincidence too, the District 9 thing, that we ended up with this other total genius named Bob Habros, who was actually nominated for an Oscar for his work on District 9, visual effects supervisor out of Vancouver, who was working with this company Atmosphere that we ended up working with. So having Bob and Simon together, and it was just like a kind of a dream team combination, I guess. And we were all really excited and enthusiastic about being able to make this entire movie based on pretty much everybody's shared childhood wish fulfillment of being able to fly and do all of these things. So everybody was really charged about making this the most realistic experience possible on this kind of a tight budget.
Dernière question.
It was more than Paranormal Activity and less than Cloverfield.
That's the way to put it, guys. Huh? Well, just one last question then. You did Big Fan.
Yeah.
Here they're playing football. What's this thing with you and football?
I don't know.
Because you dreamt about the football scene on the plane, you told.
Because I'm not good at football, so I guess I played football for like a half a semester in high school, and I got a concussion, and then my mom pulled me out, and it was really embarrassing. So that's my only connection in real life to football, But
you dreamt of the football scene on a plane.
It's just such a American pastime kind of a thing, and I think baseball is boring. So I didn't want to be throwing a baseball around in the clouds. Football is way more exciting. I guess that's really it. But Big Fan, that was a creation of Robert Siegel, who wrote The Wrestler, and he's one of the founders of The Onion. He was editor-in-chief for many, many years. So he's a huge diehard Steelers fan, football fan. He hates the Giants, which is really funny. He's an obsessed Giants fan. But that was just all coincidence.
So what's coming up next that you can tell us about?
Going back to LA in a couple days.
And doing nothing.
And doing nothing. More talking to people. But I'm just, like I said, I'm just working on some ideas and stuff, and whatever it is I'll be lucky enough to do, I want it to be really cool. So
thank you for being cool with us tonight.
Thank
you all
for being cool with me.